I'm Roger Gould, and I'm the creative director of Pixar's Theme Parks Group, and I collaborate with Walt Disney Imagineering on all Pixar stories and characters as they appear throughout all of the Disney parks worldwide, which includes the Disney Cruise Line and, of course, Disneyland, the original park in California, Walt Disney World in Florida, Tokyo Disneyland, Paris Disneyland, Hong Kong Disneyland, and Shanghai Disneyland, which is currently under development. So I've been at Pixar for about 4 or 5 years, and I was creative director for our shorts group, which meant basically all original animation outside of the feature films. And we would occasionally get these calls from folks in Imagineering, oh, we need a little bit of Buzz Lightyear for this thing, or we need a little bit of that. And then a project was greenlit, Turtle Talk Crush, for Florida at Epcot. And they wanted to take Crush, who'd been such a minor character in Finding Nemo, and expand him into this 12-minute interactive experience. And I was like, well, that's interesting, but let's talk more about who that character is. And we also need an environment, we need animation, we need Dory, we need a lot of help with Crush. And it was the first project that I got really deeply involved in, and it was so fun to do because suddenly it took all the things that I did all the time in terms of animation and storytelling and character, but it added all these other physical and interactive dimensions to it. And that was basically the start of it. And soon after that, Imagineering greenlit 3 Pixar-inspired attractions at the same time. And I thought, you know, I think that's a full-time job for somebody at Pixar to work with Imagineering, and I'd like to have that job. And basically, John Lasseter is such an enormous fan and proponent of the parks. I said, John, I'd like to create a theme park group here at Pixar, and I'd like to be in charge of it. He said, great, go for it. The Finding Nemo submarine voyage at Disneyland in California was such an incredibly fun and really challenging project to do because the submarine voyage was one of Walt Disney's signature attractions that he opened in 1959, and it ran for almost 40 years. But there were a lot of physical, functional things about it that made it really difficult to maintain. There was all these sets and animatronics that were submerged in water, which is incredibly brutal and destructive to those physical objects. So over the decades, just the decay really took its toll. And so finally, they shuttered the attraction, and really without any clear vision of what would ever become of it. There were even people who said, just fill it in, just get rid of it so the guests stop asking when is it going to open again. And in 2003, before Nemo opened, Kevin Rafferty, one of the brilliant show and concept writers at Imagineering, was at a theater and had just seen the Titanic, the documentary that Cameron did, and walked down to the lobby, and there was the giant in-theater display for Nemo, which was a giant sculpt of Bruce the shark with Marlin and Dory. And he just had a light bulb moment, like, oh, that's how we bring the submarine back to life. It was not that fast to pitch it and make it happen, but we built a mock-up, a physical mock-up in the lagoon right there, and I was there when we walked Michael Eisner into it to walk down into a submarine, which were all just literally sitting there parked in the show building. It wasn't like they got rid of them. They had all the original submarines just sitting there waiting for their day in the sun. And we set up a mock-up, and he went down and watched it with the animated Nemo characters mixed in with the physical environment and the water, and he's like, okay, that's good, let's do that. And basically, we opened in June of '07, so it was about a 4.5-year project. And there are so many pieces, so many technical and physical and mechanical, animation, lighting, music, so many elements that come together to bring an attraction to life. And that one, having the additional challenge of, really, there is water. Those really are submarines. They don't go any deeper than when you get into them. But the windows are constantly submerged in water. And so that's a really challenging element to work with, and to work with lighting and music and effects and animatronics. So it was an incredible experience. Well, as I think a lot of people know, John Lasseter grew up in Whittier, right near Disneyland, went there all the time as a kid, and when he was at Cal Arts in college, he worked at the park. He was a Jungle Cruise skipper. He's just always loved the parks and loved how they were an extension of Walt Disney's vision of the films and the stories that he brought to life. And so from the first Toy Story, when Imagineering asked, oh, would you mind, could we put some of the Toy Story characters in a parade in Florida? You know, John was over the moon, like, oh my God, my characters are going to be in a Disney park. And so he's always been an enormous fan and a huge supporter of bringing the Pixar stories to the Disney parks and bringing them to life. And what John always said when we were an independent company, and really still says today, is that if it says Pixar on it, that has to mean that it's better than what people expect. We have to put out a fantastic movie. If it says Pixar on an attraction, that means it has to be the best version of that attraction they can imagine. And so that's what I love about working with John, and he's still very involved and very passionate about the parks projects, is that it always has to be crazy great. That's the bar. And it's a fantastic place to aim for all the time. What's really fun where I sit as this Pixar theme park sort of adjunct to Pixar, adjunct to Imagineering, is getting to collaborate with both of those fantastic studios. And what's really been fascinating to learn over the past 6 years of working with Imagineering is that the core culture of Imagineering is almost identical to Pixar's. It's a desire to make great experiences for our audiences, a desire to use new technology to push our ability to tell stories in a way that we never could do before, and fundamentally insanely collaborative as an endeavor. I mean, no one person makes an attraction or a theme park or a movie. And so you have hundreds of people, an incredible array of disciplines, writers and designers and architects and engineers and ride engineers and music and audio, and everybody has to come together, lighting, to put on a show. And it really is in many ways much more like theater, because you have a physical set and you have physical props, audio animatronic characters, all these things that have to work together. When we make a movie at Pixar, we spend a couple of years just in story reel and developing the story and the design of the characters. But when we finally go into shot production and we finish the first scene of a movie, those 50 frames are exactly the finished movie. They're done. And the whole rest of the movie gets dropped in scene by scene, and you see that whole film getting more and more finished. But you can really feel in those first 50 frames, what is the look of this movie going to be like when it's done? An attraction is the actual opposite, because an attraction is the complete opposite. We have all these elements that we design, but then we have to go build a building. We have to go engineer a ride system. We have to go build ride vehicles. We have to build sets. We have to build audio animatronics. We're doing all of these things generally in separate locations. And then only in the last few months of a project do we bring it all into the show and put it together and integrate it into the final ride experience that guests are going to have. So it means that you, first of all, really, really have to use a lot of imagination to think, I'm making thousands of choices now. Are these all going to come together the way I want? Imagineering has totally moved in the 21st century. We do pre-visualization of these attractions now. So we get to virtually ride these years ahead of that physical experience. But when it comes down to those last 6 months, these are site-specific artworks, and you have to go and you have to ride them and you have to walk through them in order to really bring them to life and figure out what's working, what's not working, and balance all those elements, very much like theater, to put on the show.